watching the National News Desk, America's News Now.
At the state emergency response team preparing for the largest evacuation that we have seen, most likely since 2017 Hurricane Irma.
Another hurricane gets ready to hit the weather-battered state of Florida. What we know about Milton's grip and why all eyes are on FEMA as the need for an emergency response kicks into high demand. Then, 1 year since tragedy struck in Israel, beginning a war that's unleashed unprecedented loss and thrown the Middle East to the precipice of an all-out regional war with Iran. Tonight, how that fateful day is being commemorated as the fighting rages on. And a disturbing disconnect between the makers of car-braking technology and those who are regulating it. We investigate the law that could be failing to keep drivers safe. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Florida gearing up for the second installment of a 1-2 punch as yet another fast-moving hurricane, Milton, strengthens to a Cat-5 storm, taking aim at the Tampa Bay area of Florida, still climbing back from Hurricane Helene. Milton projected to hit as early as Wednesday night, becoming the second hurricane to make landfall in Florida in less than 2 weeks. And the third to hit in 2 months, when including Hurricane Debbie. Florida's Ron DeSantis earlier today gave an update on preparations and the challenge to still struggling communities.
We have 51 counties in Florida currently under a state of emergency. The executive order that I signed over the weekend also orders all disaster debris management sites and landfills to be open 24/7 in the lead up to Hurricane Milton. We had a lot of debris left from Hurricane Helene on Florida's Gulf Coast. That creates a huge hazard if you have a major hurricane hit in that area this week.
And stay with us as we continue to track the trajectory of Hurricane Milton and its timeline for landfall. We'll have coverage for you both on air and online at thenationaldesk.com. Tonight, as FEMA continues its efforts across 6 states battered by Helene, concerns that the agency won't have enough funding to respond to yet another emergency weather event. House Republican leaders say lawmakers will not be returning to put up additional aid for FEMA until after the election. House Speaker Mike Johnson explains what's required to put out more emergency aid.
The thing about these hurricanes and disasters of this magnitude is that it takes a while to calculate the actual damages, and the states are going to need some time to do that.
And given the immense need for those impacted by this severe weather, the National News Desk is partnering with the Salvation Army to assist with humanitarian relief efforts across the disaster zone. Viewers like you have helped raise more than $250,000 just days into the Sinclair Cares Hurricane Helene Relief Campaign. Sinclair is donating $50,000, bringing the total to over $300,000 already. Go to sinclaircares.com or scan the QR code to the left of your screen right now to make a donation. And again, thank you. President Biden and the First Lady mark 1 year since the October 7th massacre on Israel that started the war in the Middle East. On this day last year, hundreds of Hamas fighters and other terror groups launched a surprise assault, crossing the Gaza border into Israel, killing nearly 1,200 people, most of them civilians, and taking another 250 people hostage. There are reportedly about 100 hostages who remain in Gaza. Not all of them are believed to be alive. At least 4 of them are American. And yet, 1 year later, an agreement to bring them home and to end the war remains out of reach. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins visited Israel ahead of this grim anniversary as part of a delegation organized by the nonprofit Middle East Press Association. She joins us now with stories of those who survived.
More than 1,200 people woke up on October 7th, 2023, not knowing it would be their last sunrise. A year later, the world pausing to remember those lost, those still held hostage by Hamas, and those who lived. like Daniel Sharabi, who was at the Nova Music Festival. This video taken moments before the attack. Then the music stopped and the air filled with gunfire.
This is the second that I understand that something wrong is going to happen.
Daniel and his brother pieced together what was happening and sprung into action. A former IDF medic, Daniel started performing triage on the injured.
What do you remember
Nothing.
thinking as this is happening?
When it's happening, you only act. You're not thinking. Your instinct walking very fast.
They spotted an IDF tank with no living soldiers inside, found weapons, and began firing back at Hamas. Daniel called his former IDF officer, who then stayed on the phone with him for hours, giving as much help and guidance as possible. Daniel kept commanding those around him while still giving medical care.
I'm only one person, and I cannot do everything, so I give the orders how to do, what to do to everyone around me who can help, and together we did a good job.
They saved around 100 people, but 20 of his friends died. Not far away at Kibbutz Nir Oz, Arit Lahav survived by physically holding the shelter door closed.
At first, when we heard the terrorists breaking our house, beating and banging, my daughter grabbed my hand and softly and said how much she loves me. And we just said goodbye words to each other, thinking that these are our last minutes.
117 of this kibbutz's 400 residents were either killed or kidnapped on October 7th. For those who lived, it's now time to figure out, step by step, how to rebuild.
Part of the moving on process is figuring out what to do with buildings like this. Do you leave them up as a reminder of what happened here, or do you knock them down and start over? The residents of this community will take a vote in the coming weeks and months to decide. In Nir Oz, Israel, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
And in the wake of October 7th, the grim human toll has also devastated communities in Gaza, laying claim to tens of thousands of innocent Palestinian lives, making this the deadliest war in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Tonight, a humanitarian crisis continues to unfold in Gaza, where more than 1 million people have been rendered homeless because of hostilities as the Gaza Strip sees a near total collapse of its healthcare system, shortages of food and clean water, with the UN saying famine is now spreading. 1 year later, no ceasefire deals in place as the IDF signals it has no plans of halting its campaign in both Gaza and now Lebanon. Just a few hours ago, Israel's military has people in Lebanon has told them to avoid the coastline south of the Awali River and refrain from using boats, warning that it will soon take action against Hezbollah in the area. Tonight, Israeli Defense Forces also intensifying operations in Gaza, declaring Palestinians must evacuate the whole upper half of the enclave. Meantime, in Lebanon, where Israel says it's destroying Hezbollah's capability, huge explosions devastating the southern suburbs of Beirut. All of this happening as both Hezbollah and Hamas continue to fire rockets into Israel towards the cities of Tel Aviv and Haifa. Some of the rockets have gotten through Israeli defenses. Multiple injuries have been reported, but no deaths so far. Georgia's 6-week abortion ban is back on for now. The state Supreme Court is halting a lower court ruling blocking the law as the state is appealing that decision. Last week, Fulton County Superior Court said the 2019 law banning almost all abortions after 6 weeks was unconstitutional. That decision re-implemented the previous restrictions, beginning at viability, roughly 22 to 24 weeks of pregnancy. Texas's abortion ban also getting a win in court today. The Supreme Court says the federal law requiring hospitals to provide emergency abortion care or lose federal funding cannot be enforced in Texas. The state of Texas successfully sued the Biden administration over the law, and it was upheld by a lower appeals court. The Justice Department had asked the Supreme Court to wipe away that ruling, but today the court sided with Texas. As we look ahead, the Supreme Court expected to convene tomorrow to consider another pivotal Biden administration case. The High Court expected to hear a challenge to Biden's efforts to regulate untraceable, often homemade firearms known as ghost guns. Major American cities report the measure has caused a reduction in the use of these weapons within their borders, but at question is whether federal agencies can expand the definition of firearms to include parts that can be assembled at home in minutes. The manhunt for 33-year-old Seth Altman continues into its 5th day. Police say Altman, a police chief in Amarillo, attempting to serve a warrant last Thursday night. Altman is considered armed and dangerous. The state is now offering a reward of up to $10,000, and the FBI field office in Dallas is offering an additional $5,000. For information leading to Altman's arrest, Chief Rex Plant is recovering in the hospital. New England Patriot safety Jabril Peppers pleaded not guilty in court today on assault and drug charges. Peppers was arrested over the weekend after police responded to a disturbance call at a home in Braintree, Massachusetts, early Saturday morning. Court documents say a woman told police she was hit and choked by Peppers and pushed down a flight of stairs. The NFL veteran surrendered to police without incident. Boeing and striking union representatives are meeting today along with federal mediators to try and end the 24-day strike that has put a halt on new airplane construction in the Northwest. This as both sides are now seeing losses during the work stoppage. Striking workers missed their first paycheck last Thursday, and they also lost access to their company-based health insurance.
I took them seriously when they said save money, save money. The newbies here that have been here 5, 6, 7 years, they're the ones that are hurting. You know, because they're the ones who are closest in pay scale to people who are out there not working for Boeing.
And Boeing is estimated to be out more than $1.6 billion in economic productivity and have furloughed thousands of non-union workers during the strike to save money. Close to 3,000 healthcare workers in Michigan have given a strike notice for a one-day walkout next Tuesday. 98% of service employees, International Union Healthcare Michigan members, voted in favor of the strike. The union is asking for pay increases they say were taken from them during the pandemic. Michigan Medicine says they believe they can come to an agreement before the strike happens. Deputy New York City Mayor for Public Safety is now the 5th member of Eric Adams' administration to resign. Philip Banks III is among the many officials who had his phone taken by the FBI in their bribery investigation of Mayor Eric Adams. Banks was ready to step down at the end of the year, but will now leave office next week. Mayor Adams has pleaded not guilty to 5 counts of bribery and has refused to resign. Coming up next year, illegal immigration dips. The policy shift behind the drop as border security remains a key issue for voters. Plus, a Sunday morning shooting foiled. How fast-thinking church security protected its entire congregation. And later, examining emergency braking. Why certain protections for pedestrians may not be working as well as we think. September saw the fewest number of apprehensions along the southern border in President Joe Biden's term in office. 54,000 migrants caught is also the lowest number since August of 2020 and a near 80% drop from the record high last year in December. The Biden administration updated asylum rules over the summer after Congress was unable to pass new border protection legislation. And here is a live look over Washington, D.C., where a government watchdog group says the presidential administration is in line to set an unwanted record. According to the report, by next January 1st, $1 trillion of improper payments will be sent out to those who don't deserve it. Christine Frizzell takes a look at where this money is going.
When the world shut down and the government stepped in, it was hard to imagine just how many people would try to cheat the system and succeed.
There were some in the United States and abroad who exploited the crisis to engage in benefit fraud to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars.
But it turns out pandemic fraud is just one piece of a discouraging puzzle outlined in a new government watchdog report on improper payments.
Improper payments are made by the government to the federal government, to the wrong person or in the wrong amount.
Open the books revealing $672 billion in improper payments during the 4 years of the Trump administration and $764 billion under 3 years of the Biden administration. Now on track to surpass $1 trillion in improper payments when adjusted for inflation.
$235 billion in the last fiscal year went to improper payments. That's more than the entire budget of every state except for California. And as you said, it's almost $500,000 per minute. By the time Joe Biden leaves office, it will have added up to $1 trillion.
While the numbers have decreased under President Biden, administrations for decades have had a hard time preventing improper payments, which include millions of dollars to those who have died or who are serving time in prison. The IRS found to have given billions in erroneous tax credits and hundreds of millions more to families claiming to have more children than they actually did. As with many of this country's biggest problems, Congress does have a role here. Critics say lawmakers could step in to help with new laws that would designate more funding and resources to help agencies get improper payments under control, but which many believe would save far more money in the long term, as the national debt sits at $35 trillion. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
Beginning later this month, collegiate athletes can begin making claims to be part of a $2.8 billion settlement that will transform college sports by allowing schools to directly pay players. Today, a judge ordered the preliminary approval of the agreement that updates the definition who is subject to oversight in name, image, likeness deals. A final hearing is set for April 7th of next year, the day that one of college sports' biggest moneymakers, March Madness, comes to a close. SpaceX successfully launched a Falcon 9 rocket for the European Space Agency's Hera spacecraft today. According to SpaceX, the Hera mission is set to investigate the asteroid that NASA struck with its DART mission in 2022. This is all part of the Save the Earth test if an asteroid ever becomes a legitimate threat to hit the Earth. Unlike previous SpaceX launches, this rocket did not return to Earth because it needed all of its fuel to propel Hera on its mission. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America. And we start in Austin, Texas, where church volunteers may have stopped a mass shooting by firing shots of their own.
How concerning or how shocking is it to hear about what happened this morning at the church up here?
I don't know about fear. I mean, it's very concerning. You know, it was just outside my neighborhood.
The Burnett County Sheriff's Office says deputies responded to Epicenter Church on North U.S. Highway 281 this morning for a welfare check. When they arrived, they say they learned shots had been fired at the church by a member of the volunteer safety team. According to the Sheriff's Office, the safety team member said he confronted two suspicious male suspects, one with a rifle, outside the church. The safety team member fired multiple rounds, causing the suspects to flee. Rodriguez says that volunteer is a hero.
I mean, what would have happened if the security guard wasn't there? It could have been bad for everybody in the church.
It's a very true statement, having been there at Katrina, that this is the Katrina of the mountains.
So Mercy Chefs brought the kitchen sink and then some.
I think that this is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my whole life, to be honest. It makes every 3 hours sleep worth it.
And it hasn't stopped since October 1st.
We're here in the dark, we come back in the dark, and it's all worth it when we see somebody open that box and a tear run down their eye.
Even though the chefs travel with the organization, even more help comes from volunteers.
We started with just 1 or 2, and now we're here at 80 a day. When you're seeing this and you're seeing the massive scale of this disaster, you're also seeing people in the middle of it all helping their neighbor.
Takes a village, but great to see everyone coming out to support each other. Coming up next year, all cars will soon be fitted with automatic emergency braking for road safety. But do these systems actually make cars safer on the roads? We're back in 90 seconds. Advanced driving features are surging ahead, but there's a disturbing disconnect between the makers of the technology and those who are regulating it. We've been reporting on the limitations of automatic emergency braking systems for years. And a new standard from the government was supposed to put everyone on an even playing field and keep drivers safe. But as national investigative correspondent Lisa Fletcher reports, the industry now says that standard is impractical and could create danger.
Automatic emergency braking, or AEBs, commonly come standard in most new cars. But what's not standard is under which circumstances they're supposed to work, like in darkness, where we witnessed several systems failing to avoid crash dummies. To combat differences and potentially save hundreds of lives a year, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the agency charged with keeping you safe on the road by enforcing vehicle performance standards, released a rule that would require automatic emergency braking by 2029 that can detect pedestrians in daylight and darkness and stop a vehicle at 62 miles an hour to avoid a car in front of it, to help address the crisis of deaths on our roads.
This rule has no relationship with the 10 years of engagement and investment and process that we've had with the agency.
John Bozella leads the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, a trade association that represents nearly the entire automotive industry in the U.S. The group says NHTSA's rule is not only impractical, but derails years of work between industry and regulators.
This rule requires vehicles to stop at high speeds. I'm talking highway speeds, complete stop, zero contact. My concern is that we are going to trade avoidance of front-end collisions for an increase in rear-end collisions.
What risks do you see coming when NHTSA is asking even more of technologies that are yet to be perfected?
I worry that the testing requirements in this rule are not fully feasible at this stage. I really worry about that.
In a letter to NHTSA, the organization petitioned the agency to reconsider its rule, asking it to reduce the test speed at which the brakes must perform, allow drivers to deactivate the systems under certain conditions, and to revise its evaluation of the costs. Meantime, AEB systems currently deployed could leave consumers in the dark,
to even be able to detect danger,
as flashy ads tout a technology that the very car makers assert isn't ready to meet government standards.
Car makers can't have it both ways. They can't say, NHTSA, you're moving too fast, we can't perfect the technology, but then on the consumer-facing side in the ads say, or imply that the technology is perfect. Who is to communicate this to the consumer?
It's such an important question. It's such a great question. I'm glad you've asked it. This is one of the things that we're working with NHTSA and the Department of Transportation on, is how can we build out this education effort. We're working on those things with the agency because you're 100% right. Customer trust is important, and part of trust is education.
We asked NHTSA for a comment about the Alliance's petition and risks to drivers if a technology requirement is mandated before it's ready. It told us it doesn't comment on pending petitions. For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
If you missed it, a history-making basketball game played last night in the preseason game between the LA Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. LeBron James and his son Bronny became the first father-son duo to play together on an NBA team. A lot of build up to this. It was only for about 4 minutes, but fans were, of course, delighted. You know that. Perhaps no one more than Dad, who tweeted this morning that it was surreal. Bronny took to the court with the name James Jr. on his jersey, the game coinciding with his birthday. Hard to top that. It's going to do it for us for this edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tonight.